All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So to those of us who are joining, no matter where you are in the world, it's either good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Rick, and I'm here on behalf of the Project Spectrum outreach team and my home base, which is Move America. We want to thank you so much for joining today's webinar on cybersecurity resilience in the manufacturing industry. So over the next 45 minutes or so, because I always like to try to give you a little bit of your time back, we're going to talk about how small and medium manufacturers can protect themselves, stay compliant, and bounce back from cyber incidents. Now, don't worry. I promise you, I'm not going to just read slides at you. And we are going to make sure you get a copy of this slide deck afterwards. I will try to keep this lively, maybe sneak in a few pop culture references along the way. Please forgive the dad jokes. I try to keep them at a minimum, but every now and then they just sort of slip out. So I am your presenter today. Again, I'm here on behalf of the Project Spectrum outreach team, which is led by my colleague extraordinaire, Mark. Project Spectrum, for those of you unaware, is a Department of Defense recognized cybersecurity awareness initiative. We're providing all the tools, training, and resources that businesses need, organizations need, academia needs, government agencies need, doesn't matter who. We want you to increase your cybersecurity awareness. We want you to maintain compliance in accordance with DoD contracting requirements. So just to go over some quick housekeeping stuff. Your microphones are muted. So don't get worried about that. All we're trying to do is reduce the number of surprise dog barks or leaf blowers or lawnmowers in the background. Please make sure your name is displayed correctly, unless you want to be remembered forever as iPad number 3 or Galaxy Note. It doesn't really matter to us, but just make sure your name is how you want it to be. Lastly, if you have questions during the webinar, make sure you're dropping them into the chat, because we have some time dedicated at the end for Q&A. Plus, we'll be answering questions in the chat throughout the webinar. Again, the Project Spectrum team is here. Our cyber advisors are on board, and they're here to give you the information that you need. Now, have to let you know, since Project Spectrum is brought to you by Echelon, which is based in the state of Maryland, a two-party consent state. I have to make you aware that you are part of a recorded webinar. Even though your microphone is muted and your camera is off, your name is still showing. You'll show up in the chat transcripts. We do want to make sure that you are comfortable with that. So because it's a two-party consent state, I will give you time now. If you are not comfortable being part of a recorded webinar, please go ahead and log off now. We'll make sure that you get the recording of this afterward. But if you are willing to be part of a recorded webinar, just stick around, because we're about to get going. And we did have somebody drop off, so we want to make sure we give you that opportunity. So here is today's agenda. Here's our roadmap. We're going to start with what Project Spectrum is all about. We always like to give that little bit of nudge. Then we'll look at the current threat landscape, who's attacking manufacturers and why. From there, we're going to go into compliance, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC, Federal Contract Information, or FCI, Controlled Unclassified Information, CUI. We might throw in a few acronyms after that too. And then the heart of today's talk, which is cyber resilience. We're going to share a case study from Norsk Hydro, and then we're going to wrap things up with resources and Q&A. So kind of think of it like a mini series, a few episodes, some drama, hopefully no cliffhangers, definitely no rom, but maybe a little calm. So when you're talking about Project Spectrum, what are we all about here? We're a Department of Defense initiative that is designed to help organizations, especially small and medium businesses, improve their cybersecurity awareness and meet compliance requirements. Now, our mission is to strengthen national security by protecting the defense industrial base. In plain English, we're here to keep businesses that are part of the defense supply chain from being the weak link in the supply chain, because you remember what happened on that game show. If you are the weakest link, goodbye. We provide tools, training, templates, and guidance. Think of us kind of as the AAA for cybersecurity. You don't think about us every day, but when your digital tire blows out and you're on the side of the road, you're going to be glad that we're around. All right, so let's jump right into the threat landscape. Let's talk about why small and medium businesses are such popular targets. Now, you got to see these numbers. These are pretty staggering. We've got some figures here, and I'm telling you, these are a little bit shocking. Where we talk about all the different cyber attacks that target small and medium-sized businesses, it's almost half. But less than a quarter, less than 20%, less than 15% of those small and medium businesses actually have plans to mitigate those attacks. Then you've got the number of breaches that are caused by PEBCAC. The problem exists between the keyboard and the chair. That's human error. We tend to have that a lot. You've got the range of costs for cyber attacks, and then you've got the number of small and medium-sized businesses who recognize that your property and casualty insurance on your business insurance is not going to cover a cyber attack. You have to have special insurance coverage. So you really have to understand, when it comes to all of these figures, why are small and medium businesses such popular targets? Well, first of all, you've got intellectual property. Your designs and your processes are valuable, especially to the wrong folks. Second, you've got supply chain access. You got to understand, these threat actors see you as the side door into bigger contractors. You are that pass-through. And third, you've got limited resources. We get it. Most SMBs don't have full-time cyber teams. You're busy making parts, not chasing threat actors. So you got to remember, when you think about the fact that the average attack costs between $653 and $826,000, oh my goodness, that's the kind of invoice that makes you want to crawl under your desk with a pint of Ben & Jerry's. But here's the kicker. Again, we talked about the number of breaches that come from human error, almost 3/4 of those errors. Translation, someone clicked on the wrong link, which just proves the biggest cybersecurity risk is us. And we're not going anywhere because AI is not taking over as everybody thinks it is. A lot of people rely on it, but trust me, it's not going to just take over for humans. So specifically, when you're talking about manufacturers, why are they such big targets? Well, again, you've got a couple of good reasons. Number one, you've got supply chain access points. You've got valuable intellectual property, and you've got limited in-house cyber resources. Look, we understand you are focused on production. You are not looking about, who's going to attack me and when and where, because you've got to focus on getting stuff out the door. Attackers know that. These threat actors understand that you're focused on those production schedules. You're not looking at the firewall logs. You're not monitoring your network probably as closely as you should. And those threat actors end up exploiting that. They go where the defense is thinnest. And, for those of us coming up on football season, hey, you've seen those holes in the defensive line that the running back goes running through like you could have driven a truck through there. Don't be like that. You definitely don't want to be like that. So again, when you're talking about manufacturers, you're talking about 4 really big threats. You've got a list of them here, but the 4 biggest threats are phishing, ransomware, supply chain vulnerabilities, and intellectual property theft. Now, you have to understand what makes ransomware especially brutal here is that it doesn't just lock up your files. It halts production. It's shutting down everything. Everybody's going home. Nobody's collecting a paycheck. Nobody's collecting on invoices, and nothing's being produced. Picture your entire assembly line frozen just because somebody wanted to find out if the invoice that got attached as a PDF was actually overdue or supposed to be paid or a real invoice. You got to realize all of these things tend to happen. It's like Jaws. Remember the movie Jaws? The shark wasn't scary because you saw it all the time. It was scary because you didn't see it, and it could strike anywhere, anytime. Ransomware is definitely your shark. So you've got all of these different top threats and unique repercussions, and these all could end up costing you a lot of time, a lot of money, but mostly, cyber attacks cause you damage to your reputation. You are never going to get that trust back if you are the target of a cyber incident, a successful target at that. People are going to lose faith in you, and it's going to really damage your reputation, and it's going to take a lot to overcome that. So now let's shift over to CMMC, which again is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. Okay, you have to understand there are 3 levels of CMMC. You've got level 1, which is foundational. This is the basics. This is just handling federal contract information, or FCI. Level 2 is where you start to get more advanced. That's why they call it advanced. This is for Controlled Unclassified Information, or CUI. You've got to protect that. And then level 3, you've got expert. These are the black belts of CMMC. They're protecting the high value assets that are tied to national security. You know, again, if you think about it, I talked about black belt. Think about it from martial arts terms. You've got white, brown, and black. And, you know, understand something. Just as watching Cobra Kai on Netflix doesn't make you a martial arts master, looking at these levels of CMMC maturity and certification and compliance from a distance and saying, yeah, I think I can do that, that doesn't quite cut it. You really have to make sure that you're going a little further down the rabbit hole than that. So what you need to remember is when you're going between level 1 and level 2, it's all about understanding the difference between FCI and CUI. So let me break it down in pretty plain English for you. FCI is sensitive, but it's not classified. This is stuff like contracts and org charts and performance reports, okay? It's information that you don't want out there, but again, not classified. CUI, on the other hand, still not classified, but way more sensitive. Proprietary business info, your technical drawings, anything that's sensitive to like military or law enforcement. You don't want them knowing where the troops are. You don't want them knowing where the speed trap is set up, although you want to know where the speed trap is set up because you don't need those points on your license, and you certainly don't need that call from your insurance agent asking you why you got points on your license. But trust me, you don't want to be sharing that information. If the DoD gives you information like that, you need to know that it needs to be protected, whether it's FCI or CUI, because again, whether it's FCI or CUI is going to determine your compliance requirements. And that's why the rules are very straightforward. If you handle FCI, you need at least CMMC level 1 compliance. If you're handling CUI, you need at least CMMC level 2. And then again, understanding your data is the first step to knowing your obligations. And that's why we're going to move on to cyber resilience, because you got to remember, cybersecurity is about keeping attackers out. Cyber resilience is about what happens when they inevitably get in. See, you got to understand, when it comes to cyber resilience, you need to identify your critical assets, you need to protect your systems, and you need to detect problems, right? Because that's really where you've got to have the heart of things going on. And then once a problem is detected, you've got to respond quickly and you've got to recover quickly. It's your digital airbag. You hope you never need it, but if you do, you're certainly going to be glad it's there. And especially if you are a manufacturer within the defense industrial base, you need to make sure that operations keep running even if a cyber threat happens. So connecting all of these efforts with CMMC, that's going to enhance both your security and it's going to enhance the continuity of your manufacturing activities. Now, you have to understand that cyber resilience, again, assumes that incidents will happen. Well, you You have to understand there's no such thing as a perfect defense. Even the best defense in any sport is somebody's going to get through every now and then. Otherwise, the score would just be lopsided every single game. There's no such thing as perfect defense, and that really isn't the goal. The goal isn't perfection. It's minimizing the damage and keeping operations running. You have to understand that means that risk management, tested incident response, and strong recovery are all part of your playbook. For manufacturers, this might include planning for operational technology or OT, as well as IT disruptions. Because again, you're not just defending servers, you're defending assembly lines. Think about how much technology is driving the manufacturing process these days. Think about the computers that are running your manufacturing line. And think about how old those computers are. We've had people tell us that they're still using machines today that are running Windows XP. That would make Microsoft's hair fall out. So you got to remember, there are plenty of vulnerabilities when it comes to the manufacturing sector. And it's not about being perfect. It's about minimizing the damage and then being able to recover. So what are the key elements of resiliency? You've got 5 basic pillars, and we identify them right here. First of all, you have identify. See, we identify. I know that really does seem like a contradiction or an oxymoron or something like that, but we have to identify. You have to identify. You have to protect. You have to detect. You have to respond, and you have to recover. Identify means you're inventorying your IT and OT assets. You know what you have and how everything is connected. Protecting means that you layer your defenses. If one fails, the others catch it. Then you go on to detect, which means constant monitoring. You got to understand, you've got to spot issues before they snowball. Remember, when these threat actors gain access to your network, they're not doing anything immediately. They're sitting by. They're waiting in the wings. They're just hanging out, chilling, waiting to see what information you're sending, what information they can glean, how things are going to roll. All of that, eventually will start to snowball once they start moving. Respond means you have a plan. You know who holds what role, how things are going to be escalated. You're holding tabletop exercises because you know that you've got to be able to move quickly. Recover means getting back online fast. This is all about having tested backups, your continuity planning, minimizing your downtime. So these 5 pillars, each one of these 5 ties directly to CMMC requirements. So you got to understand, resilience isn't just a best practice. It actually is part of compliance. So again, here we are. We're talking about how these tie into CMMC, right? So let's talk about identify. You're directly supporting assessment objectives related to asset management, system boundaries, and CUI identification. You're helping to ensure that security controls are applied to the right systems and the right data flows. So you need to know which systems are handling CUI, where those data flows connect with suppliers or third-party contractors. All of that mapping is really important. Mapping your systems, but also mapping your supply chain, knowing your suppliers, what they supply, and how they connect to your systems, and then knowing where you fall within a bigger supply chain, especially if you're a subcontractor to a prime. You need to know how you are tied into that. When you're talking about protect, again, we're talking about tying into CMMC. You have to focus on protecting. You have to make sure that if one defense measure is breached, you've got others in place to still provide some protection. So you got to segment your operational technology and your information technology environments. You've got to limit the spread of the attacks. You've got to make sure that your production systems are hardened. You've got to enforce least privilege access, and you've got to control supplier and contractor access to sensitive systems. This ties in again perfectly with CMMC. It maps to access control, it maps to system integrity, and it maps to media protection requirements, ensuring that those safeguards are not only in place but enforced through policy and technical controls. You talk about media protection. One of the biggest challenges I think computers see these days are those little USB keys. Nowadays, a lot of people like to store stuff in the cloud, but you've got those portable hard drives and you got those portable USB keys. Threat actors know that if you come across one, you want to know what's on it. We want to know what's in the gift before it is opened under the tree on Christmas morning for those who celebrate Christmas. So we're going to plug that thing in, and that's when they're going to strike. You've got to really make sure that you are protecting that your system against those outside areas of media. When you're talking about detecting, again, identify issues before they escalate. You've got to have continuous monitoring of your IT and OT environments. Your production systems are going to get attacked. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And things really can unfold pretty quickly. So you got to make sure that you can detect those anomalies, flag any unusual activity like unexpected changes to machine settings or unplanned data transfers. Make sure that you're checking the login patterns. If everybody usually logs in between 8 and 5, and all of a sudden somebody's logging in at 9 o'clock at night, that should raise a red flag. And then alerting promptly. That ensures that the right people know about incidents in time to take action. Again, ties in perfectly with CMMC because it's talking about audit and accountability, system monitoring, and even event detection requirements. Making sure that you're compliant, you've got those early warning capabilities, and they're built into your daily operations. You want to make sure that you always have that nearby. When you're talking about responding, your speed and effectiveness is going to determine how much impact things have on your production, your delivery schedules, and all of your operations. So you've got to have that incident response plan. That IRP should be outlining roles, escalation paths, communication channels, internally, externally. You need to let everybody know this is one of those times where you want to over communicate because under communicating could have serious repercussions down the line. Holding these tabletop exercises. Some people think it's silly. Some people think, oh, why do I have to have ransomware, tests where somebody's sending an email and if you click a link, it says, oops, sorry, you failed. You need to go and watch this course. Why should I do that? Because you clicked the link. You need to practice. Everybody needs to practice. Even the pros need to practice. So you got to understand having those tabletop exercises, having that practice is going to help you so that you're cool and calm under pressure. You know what to do and when to do it. You're ensuring your customers, your suppliers, and your government partners are receiving those timely and accurate updates. Again, tying into CMMC directly through incident handling and reporting objectives. You need to make sure that you are prepared to act quickly to contain and mitigate any impact of incidents that involve CUI. And then recovery. This is where, again, as we put here in red, resilience proves its worth. Your goal is to restore your production systems and data as quickly as possible while minimizing the amount of downtime that you've had. Think about some of the bigger cyber incidents in this world. Think about, years ago, it was the city of Baltimore that was like completely shut down. The city government was just shut down for weeks and weeks because of a ransomware attack. And they couldn't recover fast enough. It's not that they didn't get their data back. They got their data back, but they couldn't recover fast enough because they didn't have those processes and procedures in place. You've got to make sure that you have strategies. You've got to have redundant systems, and you got to make sure that you've got clear procedures for bringing your OT and IT environments back online, but doing it safely. Don't just bring them back up. just for them to go down again. Don't bring them back up where they're still vulnerable. You want to make sure you bring them back up where they are strengthened and nothing else is going to happen. All of that comes through continuity planning. And that planning is going to ensure that even during a recovery phase, your operations that are a priority can still function and you have defense deliverables that can still be met. Again, tying in directly to CMMC. This aligns with system recovery, contingency planning, risk management practices within CMMC. Again, it's not just compliance, but it's operational assurance right after an incident happens. So again, just a quick little reminder of how all of this maps to CMMC, because we just talked about it all. You got to remember, you structure your resilience around these pillars: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Map them to CMMC compliance. That's how you in the manufacturing sector, or any sector you're in really, is going to strengthen your defense posture and your ability to maintain integrity for your business operations under adverse conditions. If it were bright and sunny every day, they would never sell umbrellas. Always remember that. You've got to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. So when you're talking about compliance gaps, manufacturing environments face recurring challenges when they're trying to align with CMMC. Look, we realize that CMMC compliance, it shouldn't be daunting, but it's not so easy that everybody can do it and it takes 5 minutes. I mean, obviously that wouldn't really be anything that would give you much of a challenge if you're a threat actor, if CMMC compliance was a 5-minute exercise. We see the same issues again and again. It's incomplete inventories. It's unsegmented networks. No practice with incident response. The weak supplier vetting. I need something and I need it now and I don't care who I get it from. Wrong attitude. The good news is that all of this stuff is fixable, right? The bad news is that most people treat these things kind of like flossing your teeth. You know you should do it. You don't do it every day. Sometimes you do it in the parking lot just before you go in for your checkup. It's not something that, is top of mind. Again, you've got a business to run. You've got production to maintain. We understand it. We get it. But we also know that you've got to try to take these steps because it is severely, severely important. So when you're talking about a practical roadmap to resilience, okay, and I'm sorry I skipped ahead one slide. It's not a one-time thing, okay? You've got an evolving capability that grows stronger through assessment, through planning, and continual improvement. So we've got a roadmap here for you where we're basically going to follow this roadmap and build resilience step by step. This is going to give you that chance to make those measurable improvements without overwhelming your resources. Remember, every step forward is at least a step forward, no matter how small. Make enough of them, you make a bigger step forward and you keep rolling with it. So one, you need to assess your resilience maturity. So again, you need to make sure that you're evaluating your capabilities across those 5 core pillars. You need to review your asset inventories. You need to review your incident response readiness. You need to make sure that you have reliable backups. Reliable backups are huge. They're key because if you go to back up your data, if you go to restore a backup and it's data from 6 months ago, think how much has happened in 6 months. Think how much has happened in 6 hours. Think how much has happened, like how many emails you've gotten in your inbox since I've started this webinar, right? So you got to make sure that you are having that reliable backup and you're able to put it in there and get that information put back in place, and it's something that is going to be current. You've got to make sure that your network is segmented, and you got to make sure, again, you understand your supply chain dependencies. Where do your suppliers fall? Where do you fall within somebody else's supply chain? Remember, essential. You got to make sure that you are protecting both of your IT and OT environments. Next, you got to look at prioritizing some quick wins versus those longer term investments. Okay. Going after the quick wins like multi-factor authentication or network segmentation, this is something that's really going to give you something quick and easy, and it's a step forward, and it is brilliant. In our last cyber circuits, we talked about how if our guest was going to get a license plate, it would say, enable MFA or something like that. And honestly, that's true. The multi-factor authentication, as much as you absolutely hate to keep getting that notice from Outlook that you have to punch in the code that comes through the authenticator app and you got to pull out your cell phone, you got to do all of that. Look, we get it. It's sometimes a pain, but it's a necessary evil because you want that instead of somebody just being able to waltz through your inbox. Think of how many things they're going to find in there. So all of those quick wins are really going to help. Then you've got the longer term investments. These are going to require more planning and sadly, they're not free. They're going to require more budget. Modernizing your outdated OT systems, making sure that the computer that is running that piece of machinery is no longer running on a device that is running Windows XP. Maybe, try going up to Windows 10. That's only going to be out of date as of this October, so you at least be a little bit more ahead of the curve. Deploying some advanced anomaly detection tools, or even implementing that strong supply chain risk management program. All of that stuff, these are longer term investments, but again, you balance some quick wins with some longer term investments. It's going to show that progress. The progress is going to show not only to your customers and to your other stakeholders as you're part of the supply chain, it's going to help you build that solid foundation for ongoing improvement. Always keep moving forward. But remember, sometimes 2 steps forward might require 1 step backward just so that you can pivot. Don't get discouraged if that happens. All right, so the third, you've got to make sure that you're balancing compliance with production. Security should never shut down your production line. Okay, you need to make sure that everything, again, continues to move forward. So you should make sure that the resilience measures align with your manufacturing workflows instead of disrupting them. Your improvements need to match CMMC practices. That ensures that each investment provides dual advantage. You're not only meeting the compliance standards, but you're lowering that operational risk. 4, you've got to build that resilience culture. Everybody needs to have a role. They used to say in the theater, there are no small parts, only small actors, because even the person that doesn't have a line can make an interesting face that's going to let you know what's going on as part of the story. Okay, it's everybody's got to play a role. Everybody needs to understand that they are potentially the weak link when it comes to cybersecurity, especially if they just love to click on links in emails and try to see, oh, what invoice is this? Or, oh, yes, I really would like to see a funny meme and I'm going to click here, even though I don't know who sent me this email. Again, you got to make sure that everybody is aware. You've got to have that security awareness embedded into your onboarding. Make sure you're holding regular trainings, regularly conducting scenario-based exercises that involve both your IT and OT teams. And then last but not least, when it comes to this practical roadmap, study real-world examples of resilience. You got to understand, you learn from other companies because they've paved this road already, okay? You've got manufacturers in the DIB that have strengthened their resilience. So you got an aerospace component supplier here that reduced their downtime risk by creating a secure and segmented OT network and enforcing role-based access controls for their production floor systems. You've got another defense electronics manufacturer who implemented daily backup verification and tested their disaster recovery procedures quarterly, which allowed them to resume production within hours after a ransomware attempt. And that really is crucial. Resilience doesn't require reinventing operations. It's all about integrating smart security controls into existing processes so they become part of your daily routine. Remember, the point isn't perfection, it's steady progression. All right, so now we're going to take a look at a case study because, again, we want to learn from people who have been there and done that. And it's not just people who have been there and done it right, it's people who have been there and done it not necessarily right. So, Norsk Hydro, in March of 2019, this global aluminum manufacturer fell victim to a crippling ransomware attack. It was ugly. They were hit with ransomware. 3,000 servers and thousands of PCs suddenly became nothing more than glorified boat anchors. They were locked up. They were done for. The company refused to pay the ransom. They absolutely refused. They were not going to pay to get their systems back online. Now, they kept their production going with pen and paper processes. They even pulled in some retired staff who remembered how to do things the old way. They do that on TV a lot. You see the newspaper operation that goes down, and so they bring in the old pressman from 40 years ago who still knows how to run the old manual press. Now, within weeks, they were rebuilding. But the lesson that needs to be learned from them is that resilience doesn't require perfection. It requires adaptability. You got to realize sometimes this means going full back to the future with clipboards and pencils and how they did things. Remember the days when we didn't have a cell phone? No, we don't like to remember the days when we didn't have a cell phone. We like to be completely in touch. We like to have a computer on us at all time, a video camera, and a still camera. All of that has to be on us at all time. But guess what? Back in the days when those things weren't available, people still lived. There were still things that they knew how to do. Remember, you can go to different stopgap operations. You can make sure your recovery teams are working in parallel. Paying the ransom. Again, a lot of people think, well, I'll just pay the ransom and then that'll be the end of it. I'll get my system back and that'll be the end of that. No, as soon as a threat actor knows that you can pay, that threat actor is going to keep coming after you. Now they have something called extortionware. Okay, you pay us a ransom, we'll give you your systems back. Pay the ransom. Oh, yes, now we need you to pay us money so that we don't release all of your sensitive data on the dark web or on Wikipedia or wherever we want to release it. That's really ugly. And then again, that resumption timeline, you can sometimes end up back in production within days. You can sometimes end up back in production within weeks. You definitely don't want it to be longer than that. With Norsk Hydro, they were back to work in 3 weeks. So that, again, really good example, really good way of looking at things. You've got to have that adaptability. You've got to be flexible. You've got to know what it is that you need to do, how it is that you need to do it. Okay. So again, when you're talking about those lessons learned, preparedness without perfection, human resource leverage, have people understand the old ways. If you've had a lot of turnover or, again, you're a startup, there aren't going to be any old ways to be known. But if you have those resources and you're able to get that information, and sometimes it's good to document that stuff, especially if you go away from one system to another, if you get rid of the PCs that are running Windows XP and you upgrade them to Windows 10 models, but you don't get rid of the XP ones because you want to keep them as a backup, maybe put together a little manual as how to use those, because over time, people that know how to do it, they're going to leave. Your incident team coordination really matters. You want to make sure you've got those parallel task forces for crisis management, for recovery, for security, all of that. You want to make sure that you're transparent. Again, transparency. I cannot stress transparency enough, because there are serious repercussions, especially if you want to be part of the defense industrial base, right? If you are looking to be part of the DIB and you are not transparent, there are some serious things that can happen. First of all, you could lose your federal contracts. Second of all, they could come after you and say you have to repay money from contracts that you've already performed because you were doing it under false pretenses. Then there's all kinds of legal ramifications. Filing false information, trying to get a contract, that does sound a little sketchy. Sounds like something that there could be some serious fines, possibly even jail time. Not something you want to do. And then remember, having that long-term strategy shift. You got to make sure that if you get hit, you are letting everybody know, hey, this happened, but guess what? Cybersecurity, now #1 on our list. This is our biggest strategic priority. We are going to continue to make, infrastructure changes. We're going to continue to be resilient. We're going to continue to bolster our cybersecurity maturity, and that is going to help you trust us in the future, because people are going to want to trust you again, but you've got to give them a reason to do so. So, in closing, we want to talk about building that resilience culture. Okay. At the end of the day, resilience is not about technology. It's about people. Leadership buy-in definitely matters. If the top of the company doesn't care, no one else cares. And that really does filter downhill. So it has to come from the top. It has to come from the leaders. They have to make sure that they are visibly prioritizing cybersecurity along with productivity, and the rest of the organization will buy into that, and then they will fall in line. Now, cross-department collaboration, that really matters. IT, production, HR, supply chain. It's always making sure that everybody is working together toward the same goals. The same goals are to keep the lights on, to keep the machinery running, to keep the products flowing, to keep the cash coming in. That's everybody's job, right? Guess what? Cybersecurity can make all of that stop. The lights turn off, nothing's being produced, no money's coming in, everything comes to a screeching halt. It's the same thing as making sure that everybody is focused on production. Cybersecurity is something that can halt your production. So you've got to keep going forward. And that is where you have to have that continuous improvement mindset. You need to understand that threats evolve. Technology, it advances. Operations, they change. Nothing is truly ever complete, because you got to realize threats constantly evolving. Threat actors are using tactics today that they didn't use months ago or years ago. It is always evolving. These are big businesses. It's no longer somebody sitting in a hoodie, wearing sunglasses in a dark basement, staring at a computer screen, just trying to mess with you. No, these are big businesses these days. It's nation states. It's sophisticated call centers and operations where they are just laying in wait to try to get at you, get at your organization, and wreak havoc and cause chaos. It's going to get them money, or it's going to get them forward in some other way. It's going to promote their ideology. It's going to disrupt things. It's ugly. We don't want to have that. Last but not least, when you're talking about building this resilience culture, you've got to reward good security behaviors, because it matters. Celebrate the employee who reports a phishing email. Don't just call out the people who clicked on the bad link and ended up getting the red screen of death or the blue screen of death that says you failed the cybersecurity test. Celebrate the ones who actually do it and do it well. Make sure you're acknowledging them. And you've got to make sure that you are continuously promoting this and saying, look, this is a good thing. It's not something that's just taking your attention away from other things. You need to make sure that you are constantly putting yourself in that cybersecurity mindset. It's everybody's responsibility. Your ultimate defense when it comes to your cybersecurity is culture. So let's make sure that you are taking care of all of that. Now, when it comes to the resources, Project Spectrum has your back. when it comes to CMMC compliance, when it comes to cybersecurity resilience, we have templates, toolkits, self-assessment dashboards, one-on-one advisory services that are available. All of this information is available. And then if you'll notice on that little screenshot that we have there as the picture, you see that little question mark in the yellow circle? That is our virtual help desk. That is available on every page of our site. Remember Clippy from Microsoft Word? It's kind of like Clippy, except it's actually useful and not annoying. Yeah, that paperclip was really annoying after a while, but the virtual help desk on our Project Spectrum website, definitely not that. Very helpful. This gives you an opportunity to get in touch with our team anytime, day or night. Get that information in front of us, ask your question, let us know that there's a problem, and then we will be able to help you out. And again, it's not just about all of the stuff that goes with CMMC compliance. It's also about education. You got to make sure that you're training. You got to make sure that you're educating yourself. We've got blogs. We've got news items that we're constantly putting out. We've got briefings. We've got webinars like this one. We hold them every month. We hold them twice a month. We have cyber circuits next week, and I'll be talking about that in just a little bit. But again, these are all great resources that we want to make sure that you understand are available to you all the time with Project Spectrum. All you need to do is register. Registration costs you absolutely nothing. Register for free. We don't take your data and sell it to 1,000,001 telemarketers. I promise you that's not going to happen. We're simply using that information so that we could store your information in our system. You can track your compliance through the dashboard. You can track all of your activities. You can track all of the activities across your organization if you register as part of an organization. All of that information is in there. So we want to make sure that you have access to that 24/7, 365. And it is really, really, really important. All right, so now it's your turn. So I want to know what questions you have. So again, we've been answering questions as we've been going along. You want to make sure that you're dropping those questions into the chat. Normally I would say unmute if you're feeling brave, but you don't have that ability. So you can't unmute. The only person who can unmute is Mark if he wanted to read a question to me, but he's been putting them into the chat for me. So, and I promise you, this is not Jeopardy. There are no trick questions. And I always say the only dumb question is the question that isn't asked. So please, please, please go ahead and get those questions over to us. So there is a question. What has happened once I have completed my SSP, my System Security Plan? Well, again, it's one of those things where if I'm understanding the question correctly, a lot of people think that the System Security Plan is something that you draw up once, you throw it in a drawer, and you never do anything with it. So I'm going to answer it in that sense. What happens once you've completed your SSP? First of all, that is a huge milestone. That SSP is a huge step forward. We talk about that continuous progression. Congratulations. You've completed an SSP. That is definitely a feather in your cap. You've now documented how you are going to defend your system from cyber threats. That is huge, having all of that information. But what do you do next? Revisit it. Keep looking at it. Every time something changes, go back to your SSP and make sure that you have a change. If your SSP is talking about protecting all the different devices that you have, and say you have a bunch of Windows devices, and now all of a sudden somebody comes to work at your company and says, oh, by the way, I only use a Mac. Your SSP now needs to reflect the fact that it's not just Windows devices that are being protected. Say on your production line, you decide, all right, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to upgrade. I'm going to skip Windows 10 completely. I'm going to skip over to Windows 11. I'm going to get all new machines that are going to run our production line. Fantastic. That's when your SSP needs to be updated. Anything changes. This used to be an on-prem server. Now it's going to be in the cloud. Or it used to be in the cloud. I'm going to bring it in-house on-prem. Ooh. I'm changing data centers. It's no longer to be at this data center. It's going to be at this data center. We're using a different type of backup. All of that information needs to be reflected in your SSP every single time there is a change. Again, completing your SSP means that you've taken a huge step forward for that cybersecurity resilience. You're a big step forward in the compliance realm, but it's not something that just sits there and withers away and dies. You have to constantly revisit it, make sure it's updated, make sure that everything is still relevant, and anything that needs to change, you need to make sure that you are changing it. So again, what is the best thing that you can do when you're talking about, okay, I've finished my SSP? Well, you can reach out to Project Spectrum. Again, we have the folks on staff that you can reach out to through email, through the virtual help desk, through both. You could see us at events and you can ask us questions. All of that information is out there, but we're here to help you. We're here to help advise you. We don't write these things for you. A lot of people do ask that. Well, if I throw a couple bucks your way, will you write the SSP for me? No, it's not something you want us to do. I'm sorry. I don't want somebody writing my plan for me, especially if they don't know my system. You need to write your plan. You need to know your system, but we're here to help you. We're here to help give you that guidance. So let's make sure that you are doing it correctly. Let's make sure once it's done well. And then let's make sure that we're putting a plan in place to, hey, revisit it every now and then, make sure that it's updated, or when it needs updated, to update it. And then we have another question. As a startup, what are the advantages to using an MSP to help manage IT and OT systems versus self-managing? This is a great question. This is something that we talked about on the last Cyber Circus when we were talking with our chief nerd. That was his title. I'm not disparaging the man. That was his title, but he basically said, when it comes to going and getting help, when it comes to using a managed service provider versus doing it yourself, you got to look at who's going to have the time and the expertise to not just do it, but to do it right. Think of it this way. You could do your own taxes using just the form that you pick up in the post office, because they still have those paper forms, believe it or not. You could use a service like, one of the ones that they advertise on TV, and I'm not going to name which one, but they've got a couple different ones. You can use one of them. You could use one of the ones that are in a strip mall that suddenly show up and then there's somebody twirling a sign out in a costume, or you can go to a high-priced accountant. All of those are options, okay? MSP versus self-managing, who's going to do it and do it right, and who's going to do it best? Sometimes there are things that you have knowledge of. If it's your OT system and you go to, you're thinking about handing that over to an MSP, if they don't know that system, maybe they're not the right fit. If you know the system better than they do, then that would be a good self-management. But again, if they know things that you don't and they know nuances that you don't, that's where it could be really helpful. The other thing you have to remember is, again, you have to balance the cost versus the benefit, because sometimes it seems really easy. We're just going to throw this over the fence and somebody else is going to have to deal with it. And I'm happy to pay for that privilege. But what happens when you don't have the money to pay for that privilege? I know my neighbors in my neighborhood, some people cut their own grass and some people have a lawn service come out and do it. It's just really, do you have the time? Do you have the energy? Do you have the knowledge? Do you have the expertise? And do you have the money to have somebody else do it? All of that needs to be weighed. Again, these are questions that you can ask. These are things you can reach out to the Project Spectrum team. We're more than happy to help you, because again, a lot of our cyber advisors, if you go the route of having a cyber advisor help you, they've come from your world. They've come from the world of small and medium-sized businesses. So they're going to make sure that they understand things and they're helping you weigh the pros and the cons. We always try to make sure that we have people doing that. All right. Anything else as far as questions go? Again, I know you've been asking questions and we've been going through. The Project Spectrum team has been happily answering them. If you do have a question after the webinar, All you have to do is make sure that you get it over to us. You could send it to us through email. You can put it through the virtual help desk. We are more than happy to help out. Okay, so that leads me into how do you connect with Project Spectrum? Understand, we've got our website, projectspectrum.io. A lot of people have asked us, why aren't you a .gov? Why aren't you a .com? All of that, it's logistical. We're not a government agency, so that's why we're not a .gov. We are, backed by OSBP, which is part of DoD. But you can go to our website, register, again, free for you. All of the resources that we have available on the website that are free are yours to have. And then you get access to other resources as well that you can talk about later on. So just make sure that you're going to the website. You can always email us. Remember, support@projectspectrum.io is a great tool to have if you want to send us an email, but it's kind of like in the days of sending things electronically. Do you want to send an email or do you just want to go use the virtual help desk? I like the virtual help desk. It gives you a chance to ask that question and it's going to go through. Sometimes email servers go down. Oh, I went through a tunnel and I was trying to send it on my phone. Spell check was on and I asked something that's completely nonsensical because I didn't know how to spell that. Remember, you can still email us. We have our training webinars. Again, we hold them every month. We would love to have you here. Please mark your calendar. Be watching the Project Spectrum website for the events calendar. Be watching for emails from us. Make sure that you're on our email list. We will make sure that you get all of the information about the training webinars. And then you've got our social media platforms. We're on LinkedIn and we are on YouTube. That is where this video is going to be posted later for everybody who didn't happen to make it today. So that is going to bring us to the end of today's session on cybersecurity resilience in the manufacturing industry. First, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who spent part of your day with us. I know you could have been doing about 47 other things, including staring at an inbox that never gets any smaller. So we really do appreciate you choosing to be here. Now, remember, we want to make sure that you are checking out projectspectrum.io, finding those toolkits, templates, training, and our virtual help desk. Do a quick resilience checkup. Take what we talked about today, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Ask yourself, where is my organization strong? Where could my organization use a tune-up? Bring your team into the conversation. Don't try to answer all those questions yourself. Make sure you are getting together as a team. Cyber resilience is not a solo sport. It is definitely a team effort. So as far as what's next, we would love for you to join us again next week on our Cyber Circuits webinar. That's going to be titled, I Can See Clearly Now, Identifying, Valuing, and Defending Your Critical Assets. We're going to be joined by Tina Williams-Karoma, who is the founder and CEO of CyDeploy Inc. And Tina is going to share how asset identification, valuation, and mapping can create the foundation for a proactive defense. This is a fireside chat type webinar, not a lot of slides, more conversation, but we're going to give you a few more cybersecurity espresso shots that are going to help supplement the full pot of coffee we brewed for you today. Now, again, just an FYI, you're going to see a link to a survey appear in the chat if it hasn't already. That's going to come from my colleague and communications lead extraordinaire, Mark. Please take a few moments to give us your feedback, even if you think the host is a little bit out there sometimes with the dad jokes. All of that is useful feedback. It's going to help us shape the sessions for the future. Thanks in advance for taking that survey. As for today, I want to say thank you to the Project Spectrum team for being on board. Thanks to everybody on the Move America side from my end who helped me out with my stuff. And I want to leave you with this. Cyber resilience isn't about never falling down. Okay, if you were afraid of getting hit by a bus every time you left the house, you'd never leave the house. It's about how quickly you can get back up, not after getting hit by a bus, after getting hit by a cyber incident. How quickly can you get back up, dust yourself off, and keep that assembly line running? So thanks again for joining. I want to make sure you stay safe out there, both digitally and in real life. Try to avoid those buses. And remember, in manufacturing and cybersecurity, Control-Alt-Delete is not a business continuity plan. If that's your SSP, you are in serious trouble. Thanks so much for joining us today. Take care. We appreciate your time. We'll see you next week on Cyber Circuits. Have a great day.